Okay, identifying and treating plant diseases. First steps you need to do is look at your plant as a whole and see what a symptom is, looking at it as a whole and deciding, does it look like there might be something wrong? I don't know. And a sign is something specific that you can see. You can see it's wilted, there are holes in the leaves, something you can identify. And I forgot my water too. Think about the plant, like what are the common diseases for this particular plant? You know, for tomatoes, the list is this long, but that isn't that long for all of your plants. Look at it and make sure it's not insects. You know, you can see skins, adults, larvae, eggs. Turn the leaves over and look for eggs. Feeding signs. And if there are none of those, it's not insects, and that's a whole different subject. And then consider the pattern. Is it uniform? Is it new growth or old growth or both? And which part of the plant is affected? Is it the leaf, the stem, the fruit, etc.? Okay, these would be disorders, not diseases. So they're non-pathogenic. There's not a pathogen here. It's something in the environment. So it's temperature, too hot, too cold, moisture, too little, too much, which is our problem this year, nutrient deficiencies or toxins, and chemical damage. It says it might be non-pathogenic if the symptoms are uniform, if the new growth recovers after a time, and consider if it coincides with a specific event like hail, you know, a weather event, or the neighbor sprayed, so that can kind of help you identify too that you saw them out there doing that. So first is moisture. Too little water causes wilting and browning of the leaf margins, like that first picture up there. It's brown just on the edges. It's not brown in the middle. And then too much water is root damage, root or crown rot, or Marlys can add to a gazillion other things, I think.
Yeah, we had 9 inches of rain, water set in the garden for about 2.5 days. My potatoes died, my beans died, my rhubarb died, the dill died, if you can believe that. When I pulled up the dill, there were no roots. And the potatoes, I thought I could dig them now out of the mud and use the little ones. Well, most of them were white slime under the ground in 2 days. Oh. So too much water.
Yeah. If it's too hot, the plants won't set fruit, and sometimes they drop, like you find a tomato sitting in the bottom of that's from it's too hot. The ideal temperature for tomatoes to set fruit is 80 degrees. And we all know from here we go from spring to summer in 24 hours usually. So the other thing would be light stress along with the temp, and that sun scald that you see on your fruit if the leaves aren't shading the fruit, right? If it's too cool, you get misshapen fruit like that second picture, cat facing on a tomato. The tomato is okay. You can eat it if you can trim it off, but that's what the too cool does. Below 50, basil starts wilting, and below 40, peppers abort their flowers. And it says cucumbers may wilt as the roots have a harder time taking in water, which I didn't know. And something we don't think about here much is air pollution, and that can also affect your growth of your plants. But here, we're pretty lucky. Our air is pretty clean, except for a little smoke once in a while. The nutrient deficiencies change the leaves. the color of the leaves. So the top left is too little iron. It's a yellow leaf with prominent veins. The purple one in the middle has got purple leaves on the edges, and that's too little phosphorus. And the bottom one is too little calcium, and that affects tomatoes, melons, and squash. That is calcium end rot, blossom end rot. And it isn't that there's no calcium in the soil, it's that the plants can't take up the soil because watering was uneven. So try to be consistent with, and tonight I was looking at my plant, I have one that has blossom end rot and the rest are fine. So it's at some point in time, apparently I let it get too dry. So you never know. Chemical damage. We've all seen the 2,4-D where the leaves get kind of curled up. The amino and chlorpyrifos are used specifically to treat clover and thistles in the ditches. And so it might be the state doing it, it might be a farmer doing it, but then the property next to it may get drift from that. And it says that it makes the leaves cup, which looks similar to, although the herbicide, the 2,4-D, they get a little distorted also. This one doesn't say that, it just says it's cupping, and then that stays in the soil. That's not a good chemical to have. When you're using compost, it takes at least a year for these, and in some cases it takes 3 years for this to actually disintegrate and not harm your plants. And if you're using if you mow your lawn and you're using that for your comp, should mow your lawn at least 4 times before you use it as mulch around your plants. And the last one is dicamba, which I wasn't familiar with, but apparently it's used to control weeds in soybeans and corn. They're resistant to it, but of course nothing else is, and it drifts, and it says it will re-volatilize later, which is bad, and it's been banned, but farmers can use what they have on hand, which could be, who knows how many years this will be out there. So.
You want me to pass this leaf around?
What?
The leaf? You want me to pass the leaf around?
This leaf.
Oh yeah, your samples.
This is a grape leaf. It has 2,4-D damage. You can tell it because of the texture of the leaf. And it's got what's called strapping on one side of it, where the veins all pull together in one area. So my grapes were exposed to 2,4-D.
Oh, no.
Out in the field, not in my yard. And
You mean that's in your yard though?
my grapevine is in my yard, but the 2,4-D drift came from
Somewhere.
someone's field.
Yeah. So herbicide affects where it's directly exposed. And if it's systemic, like you used compost and it had herbicide left in it, that affects the new growth at the top. So these are all non-pathogenic, and now she's going to talk about pathogens in your vegetable gardens.
Okay, biotic means living. So the pathogens are living organisms that affect other organisms. This is the disease triangle. And in order for your plants to be affected by a disease, all 3 of these things are involved. So if one of them is missing, the disease will not affect the plants. And it could be any of the 3. The environment, all of these things that Suzanne talked about, your fertility and the temperature and humidity, rainfall, all of those are part of the environment. If your fertility is right, your plants will be healthier, and so they have more resistance to diseases and being affected by them. The plant host is a susceptible crop or cultivar. Some things only affect one kind of plant or one plant family, like tomatoes, peppers, potatoes. But others affect many, many, many different kinds of plants. The pathogen, fungi, bacteria, or virus, and they are in the environment. They are influenced by what's going on in the environment. They can be in your soil. They can be in your seeds. There's just all kinds of places that they come from. So we'll start with fungi because that's the most common. And many of these have multiple hosts. And some of them have hosts that, kind of share this back and forth. They can invade a plant cell directly without a wound. So if your conditions are right and it's the right kind of plant and you have this fungi like splash up onto your plant out of the soil from the rain, it just sits on the plant or the leaf and it starts reproducing and growing. It reproduces mostly by spores, and that bottom picture of the rust shows a really good picture of spores. They look like dust. Most of them are either sort of a rust color or a black color. Yeah, some of them are white, but if you rub the leaf, you can actually rub those spores off when you look at your hands. I've had rust in my lawn before, and I wouldn't be surprised if some lawns had rust this year. First, the grass will turn real pale yellow, and then if you are walking through it, your shoes are just orange by the time you're done walking through the lawn. So because of all the moisture that we have this year, that's a possibility. They require moisture and warmth for about 2 to 12 hours to germinate. So if it's not warm, they might not germinate. If the leaves dry off quickly, so it's less than 2 to 12 hours, it might not germinate. So I mean, there's lots of ifs in all of this pathogen stuff. The conditions have to be right, the pathogen has to be present, and so on. So these three pictures, the top one you might recognize, top left, if you've ever had corn or sweet corn smut. It's grows on basically the top of the ear or even the tassels sometimes. It appears during hot, dry conditions, and this one is usually after an injury to the plant. So it might have been a hailstorm. It might have been grasshoppers chewing the silks off the ears. It might have been corn earworms chewing into the top of the ear, but now the ear is open and the fungi is there, and here we have smut. Well, instead of being upset about it, try eating it. In Mexico, it's a delicacy. And Tammy, one of our master gardeners, tried it last year in quesadillas, and she said it was delicious. It was the best quesadillas she'd ever eaten. In Mexico, it's called huitlacoche. And they eat it as a filling in quesadillas and other tortilla-based dishes, and also in soups. So you can go online and look for recipes using corn smut and give it a try.
She said it's just like another mushroom.
Yeah, well, a mushroom is fungi, so yeah. And I'll bet you the texture is similar to a mushroom. I've never tried it myself, but it's kind of intriguing. Cankers are lesions that appear, and you can see that stem on the edamame, which is a soybean, is brown, and They appear on the stems of plants such as beans and roses, and they can become severe enough to actually kill the plant. This fungus overwinters in plant debris. So you would not want to leave those leaves on the ground. You would want to clean them up. The rust on the bottom picture, it looks like rust, right? It's got that color. It affects a variety of plants such as grasses and vegetables, especially asparagus, beans, and corn. The reddish powder on the plant is the reproductive spore of the fungus. And it's real powdery, real lightweight, real easily carried by wind. In fact, in crops like wheat, if you have a lot of strong south winds and high humidity, that's when you get rust on wheat in the field. It overwinters in plant debris, usually infects the plant during high humidity or heavy dews. Well, we've got that now. You know, we have to wait until about 10 o'clock until the dew is dried off in the morning now because of all the moisture. You may have heard of cedar apple rust. There are varieties of apples that are resistant to that. If you're thinking about planting an apple tree, you might want to check that out with all the red cedar trees that we have around here. And this is a pair, they reinfect each other. So if you've ever seen on a cedar tree, I was going to bring one and of course I forgot, but they're about, the diameter of a nickel maybe, a hard brown little ball on the ends of the tips of the branches, the leaves. When it rains, they swell up to about the size of a golf ball. They're bright orange and they get what are called horns. So little things that stick out. It looks like an alien spaceship. And those horns are what send out the spores, and that's what infects the apple trees. Now the apple trees will get little rusty round spots on the leaves. On the top it looks flat, on the bottom it looks fuzzy. If you have a real severe infestation, the leaves will turn dark and drop early. And if it's really severe, you might get little rusty spots on the apples themselves. And there is a fungicide that can be used for that. I'll talk about that when I talk about treatment. But if you treat the apple trees, then they won't spread spores because that's what they do. So when the apple tree is infected, it sends its spores out to reinfect the cedar trees. So it's a back and forth thing. But there are apple varieties that are resistant. So if you're looking for an apple tree, you might want to check that out and not plant one that is very susceptible.
And Marlys, I might just mention, when you see the horns, they're gelatinous. It's like a jellyfish almost.
Yeah.
They're not hard at all.
They're really gross.
They look like an alien. They're really weird.
As soon as I see those orange things swell up on the trees, I get out my fungicide and treat my apple trees. So I have really cut down. My apple trees are healthy now, and the number of those little things on the cedars has really been cut down. So one thing there is a treatment for. Leaf spots caused by fungi can be anywhere on the leaf. So they're across, they're between the veins, they're across the veins, they're anywhere on the leaf. And this is a really good example. If you look at this one, you can see there are places where those spots are between veins and places where they're right across the veins. They have a dry texture, and if you rubbed your hand across it, it would feel dry. It looks dry, and they often have a brighter margin around that spot. They affect all kinds of plants. again, given the right conditions and the fungus spores being present. Anthracnose affects beans, cucumbers, cantaloupe, watermelons, eggplant, peppers, or tomatoes. And the fruit itself will have a depressed circular spot. That little round black spot in the middle is the fungal structure that's going to release the spores. And this overwinters in the soil. Septoria leaf spot is a common one. I have seen that many times on my tomatoes. And it starts out with tiny little gray spots with a darker brown edge, and it spreads. It starts on the older leaves first, which are at the bottom of the plant, and you can remove those leaves and get rid of them, and it will slow down the spread to the rest of your plant or the rest of your tomatoes. This, in addition to tomatoes, this affects celery. And it does cause defoliation. So you're in extreme cases, your plant may lose all of its leaves. And then you've just got these little, poor little tomatoes hanging on there all by themselves. Early blight affects tomatoes and potatoes. It usually occurs on older plants, and it's carried in the seeds and plant residue. So there you can see it's got target-like spots. So they're rings, and the defoliation again is a problem. And when your plant is defoliated, then your fruit is exposed to the sunlight, then it gets sun scald, and so it's just a mess. Late blight, you can see it has gray patches on top of the leaf. And this one's quite advanced because the patches are really big. The bottom of the leaf will be fuzzy. So if you turn it over and it's fuzzy on the bottom, usually any kind of fuzziness will indicate a fungus, because those are the spores that are going to, send themselves out to infect other things. This one occurs when the conditions are cool and wet. And from both of these, it's affecting your potatoes. Do not save the tubers for seed for next year, because it's in the tubers. So the interesting thing here is these are misnamed. Early blight occurs in the fall. Late blight occurs in the spring. So you can just call it blight and not worry about what the other part of the name is. Yes.
With the tubers of the late blight, are they black?
They can be, yeah.
Scribbled
They
up
can
in.
turn black. Yeah.
Like a shrunk up end or something.
Well, and they would tend to be a little off texture and slimy. You would not want to use them. That is what caused the Irish potato famine. So, yeah, it destroyed their crops completely and sent a lot of them to the United States. A lot of Irish people. Alternaria leaf spot affects cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and turnips, the cruciferous vegetables. It also affects the cucurbits, which are your cucumbers, cantaloupe, watermelon, squash. And it affects eggplants and peppers. So this one, affects most of the stuff in your garden. It has small spots that expand. You can see how they've expanded in that, I think that's a cucumber leaf. And it's taking out most of the leaf of the plant by now. And dark circular rings overwinters in seeds and residue. So if you were trying to save seeds from your pumpkin to plant next year, not advisable. They're edible though. If you would like to roast pumpkin seeds and eat your pumpkin seeds, that's fine. You can do that. Just don't plant them. Black spot and black rot. affects grapes, roses, cruciferous plants, and cucurbits. And you can see the little round black spots on those rose leaves. This has happened to my grapes in the past. This year I don't have a problem with that. I'll talk about my other problem later. And the leaves get yellow and drop, and this overwinters in leaf residue. So you want to clean up the leaves and get rid of them. When we talk about pollinators, remember we said leave your plant debris over the winter so the pollinators have a place to live over the winter and in the stems and so on. Well, if your plants are healthy, you can do that. But if your plants are not healthy, then you want to clean up the debris because you don't want it infecting next year's crops. Downy mildew affects beans, cucurbits, lettuce, onions, radishes. It develops in cool, humid weather, and it has yellow spots on the top of the leaf. That's the first thing you'll notice. These little yellow angular spots. And once you see the spots, that's when you want to start treatment. Or even before, if you know, like this year with these conditions, you may want to treat for fungal diseases before you see any signs. And we'll talk about some of the treatments. Powdery mildew develops in hot, dry weather, and it has this powder on top of the leaf. That's a squash leaf there, and it just looks white. And those are the spores. And if you'll notice between these two, they develop in different conditions. So one cool, one hot, and they're in different places on the leaf. One underneath, one on top. So how can we control them? Well, first of all, remove and destroy any diseased plant material, especially clean up those dead leaves and so on that are on the ground and get rid of them. Anytime you have a diseased plant, don't put it in your compost pile. Now, if you have the type of compost where you get it really hot, which is usually a lot of compost before that will happen, that might destroy these pathogens. But most of us have small compost piles. They don't get hot on the inside, so they're not going to kill the pathogens. Rotate your crops. That's always a good thing to do, but because these pathogens don't all affect the same kind of plant, if you plant a different plant there next year, it might be okay. Create good air circulation by spacing and pruning. So you don't want the plants touching each other, and you don't want them down on the ground where the rain is going to splash the pathogens up on the plant. That far left picture there, I don't know if you can see it real well, that is a tomato in a cage, and if you'll notice, there's at least a foot of that tomato that is just stems on the bottom. So all the leaves have been trimmed off. Mulch thoroughly. That will keep those pathogens from splashing up on your plant. It will keep the moisture there so you don't have to water as much. And water in the morning, not in the evening. You want to try to keep those leaves as dry as you can keep them. So if you water at night and it gets cool and the dew forms, then your leaves are wet all night long. Water in the morning and use drip or soaker hose. Don't water over the top because you keep the leaves wet longer. Preventative fungicides. Read and follow label directions, and there are a lot of good fungicides out there. This is copper fungicide, and use this early. So now on your cucumbers, before they get those yellow spots, this would be the time to use this. Now you've got this whole little booklet in the back, and it tells you always use it only on the plants that it recommends for, not something else. Oh, I got a fungus on this plant. Is it in here? No, it's not. Oh, I'll use it anyway. No, don't do that. There are instructions for how much to use. So how many teaspoons or tablespoons or whatever do I put into a gallon of water? There are instructions for how often to do it. So like every 10 days, every 14 days, something like that. There will be instructions as to how careful you need to be with your own body. You know, do you need to be covered up? Do you need to wear boots? Do you need to wear gloves? Do you need to wear some kind of face mask? And if you need to wear that protective equipment, then you come into the house and you take a shower and you throw your clothes into the washing machine and wash them with hot water. That's for any chemical that you use on your plants. These are my grapes. This is white mold. And I have hundreds, my grapes have never had so many grapes on them. They've got, this is a small cluster, and they're not full size, they're still growing. But I'll pass this around, and it's white mold. I went out because the end of June, beginning of July, if you've got grapes, they just shoot out all kinds of leaves and vines and everything else. So all of a sudden, your grapes that were wide open are now all enclosed in all this foliage. So I went out and I pruned all my grapes. Then I sprayed them. Well, I don't have that one here. My husband went to the chemical distributor and got, because he's a farmer and he has an applicator's license, he was able to get a fungicide called Nova, which is specifically for orchards and vineyards. And so I sprayed my grapes, and I'm supposed to spray them every 10 to 14 days. And that they were fuzzy white. And now they're not. Now they're just pink. And I was wondering if I needed to clip off all my clusters that are affected, and I do not. As long as I have sprayed them and controlled that fungus, it's not going to spread as long as I keep spraying it. And they said when you eat it, just pick those infected ones off and don't use them.
What variety of grape?
That is Valiant.
Valiant.
It's South Dakota grape. I have another grapevine whose origin is unknown, other than my mother had it and it was a wonderful grape. And she took over a garden in town when she moved to town. And so I started grapevines from cuttings from that grape. And that grape is much bigger than these. And it tastes like a Concord, and it looks like a Concord. And they have no sign of white mold on them. That variety does not. Now, it is also in a different place. It's more open and gets more air and everything else. So these grapes happen to be shaded by the barn for part of the morning, so they don't dry out as well either. But so there is help for fungicides. This one is called Immunox, and what the active ingredient in it is too little for me to read. So somebody with better eyes could read that. This is what I use for my cedar apple rust, and it is amazing. And I haven't even read to see what else you can use it on, because all I cared about was my cedar apple rust. So as soon as those orange aliens appear on my cedar trees, I spray my apple trees, and then follow the directions and continue to spray them until those things on the cedar trees are no longer putting out spores. So this is amazing. For controlling powdery mildew, that's the one on top of the leaves in warm weather. You can use a baking soda treatment that is very effective, and it's recommended by extension. First of all, make sure your plants have adequate air circulation. So if you can't see anything but leaves, you may want to trim some of them out, cut them off. If they're infected, throw them away. Mix 1 tablespoon baking soda with a gallon of water and several drops of dish soap. 1 tablespoon of baking soda, gallon of water, several drops of dish soap. Spray it on the tops and bottoms of the leaves until they're thoroughly wet. And you can reapply every 10 to 14 days until the weather changes or whatever. Second kind of pathogen, bacteria. This one needs a wound in order to be able to infect the plant. It can spread from plant to plant by water, insects, equipment. So you're hoeing and you accidentally nick the stem of the plant with your hoe. Humans, we can spread this by contact from plant to plant. So if you have infected plants, you've got gloves on, you go from one plant to the next, you can spread it that way. It can be on your shoes, and you can spread it that way. If you are in your neighbor's garden and they have a lot of diseases going on, and then you walk in your garden without cleaning your shoes, you could carry the pathogens that way. And again, it can be spread by seeds of plants that are infected. So anytime you have an infected plant, forget about saving the seeds. This can overwinter in crop debris, weed hosts, or the soil. Leaf spots caused by bacteria are found most often between the veins, and they appear water-soaked. Now that bottom picture there is actually fire blight, which you may have heard of. That most commonly affects apples or pear trees. It can kill the blossoms, the shoots. It causes dieback of the branches from cankers on them. You can see how black that branch looks. It almost looks like it's scorched by fire, which is how it got its name. And another telltale sign is the tips of these little small branches will form a hook or shepherd's crook. So the little branches will all be crooked like that. So bacterial diseases, we've already talked about the fire blight, the black leaves, the shoots form a crook, and it can kill the tree. You do want to take care of it through pruning, and if you're pruning that off, you can see how far back it's black. Don't just stop there. You want to go at least a foot beyond the black. And the other thing, after every cut you make, you need to clean your tools, because you can carry it around the tree with your pruning shears.
What do you clean your tools with?
Lysol. When I prune anything, I spray this until it's just dripping wet with Lysol. I just take the Lysol jug out there with me and some paper towels. And so after it's wet and soaked, then I dry them off with paper towels, and then I go to my next cut. Okay, wilts. That cucumber wilt is carried by cucumber beetles. The plant wilts, the leaves turn yellow. If you've ever had vine borers, it might look like that too. The difference is in a vine borer, the moth lays its egg at the base of the plant. It hatches, the little caterpillar will chew a hole into the vine and live inside that hollow vine. And so only that vine will wilt like this. In cucumber wilt, the whole plant goes. Okay, if this is your vine, you find a little hole at the base of it, take a sharp knife, cut a slit like that, right across the hole, separate it a little bit, you'll find the caterpillar in there. Pull it out, squish it.
Might be more than one though.
Yeah, I have heard that. I've never found more than one when I did
I
it.
do too.
So check that there's not more than one. And then you cover that slit up with dirt and you might save your plant or yeah. The moth is kind of interesting looking. It's very pretty and it's about that long. I saw it on my bean plant and I go, that's a squash vine borer. And I went and got it before I could get to my plants. Soft rot affects celery, cauliflower, and broccoli. It has sunken dark areas. They may ooze. Many things caused by bacteria are wet or oozy looking. And it's most common in wet weather because, bacteria likes wet weather. I don't know, I can't tell you, if you could cut those sections off and eat the rest of the broccoli or cauliflower. I really don't know. I guess that's up to you if you want to try eating it or not. Bulb rot caused by onion maggots, and the maggot comes from a fly. There's a fly lays an egg on the leaf of the onion. It hatches, goes into the leaf. Leaf is hollow, goes all the way down to the onion bulb, and it chews around in there and creates an opening for bacteria that might be in the soil. This one you probably will not notice. Your onion looks fine until they've been in storage a while. So if you pick your whole onion crop and store it, and several months into storage, you take your onion and you cut it, and oh my gosh, the outer layers are all brown and yucky and slimy. It was caused by a bacteria that got in there due to this maggot. And I don't know, I use the inside of the onion and throw the outside away. But so you could probably do that with your cauliflower there too.
How do you prevent it?
How do you prevent it? Well, we'll talk about how you can prevent all these bacterial things right now. Okay, controlling insects is very important because that's what creates the injury to the leaf that allows the bacteria to get in there. Now, we have done a number of programs on insects with the seed library, and there are a couple of ways that you could go back and watch those. You can go to the library webpage. Along the left side, it'll say Seed Library. You can click on the Seed Library and all of our presentations are archived in there. Or I was just told, and I didn't know, that they're available on YouTube. So I suppose you go to YouTube and you put in Yankton Seed Library and see if they show up. Don't overwater. Water in the morning with the dripper soaker hose. Rotate crops. And fire blight requires pruning and sanitation of your equipment, as I explained. Bottom picture, those are cucumber beetles. They come in two forms, spotted or striped. The middle one is that fly that it's laying the egg on the onion leaf there to create the onion maggot. And then make sure that keep your tools clean. Even if I just pruned all my tomatoes and put the cages around them. I'm behind because of all the water we've had, but I clean that I clean my pruning tool between every tomato plant in case one would happen to have something, I don't want to carry it to another one. Monitor your plants regularly. Watch for those insects. Take care of those insects. Prevent them from getting on the plants if you can. So it's recommended, like on your squash and those type of things, put row covers over them until you see the first female flower. And that's the one that's got the teeny tiny cucumber or little baby squash or whatever attached to the flower. You need to uncover them then because they need to pollinate and they need bees to do that. Keep your garden weed free. Insects may use the weeds as a host plant. So you have more insects if you have more weeds. Third pathogen, viruses. This is named after its first host plant. So even though this virus may infect a variety of plants, tobacco mosaic virus, you may have heard of that, that was first found on a tobacco plant. So that's how it got its name. It does not mean that it only infects tobacco. These are inserted into the cell by vectors, that would be your insects, or through a wound, like hail, or cutting it with a garden tool, as well as dirty tools. So if your tools are not clean, they may have a virus on them. They can be species specific, meaning they only infect one kind of plant, or they can infect multiple plant families. They can spread through contaminated seeds, tubers, and cuttings. And they replicate when specific conditions are met. Now, viruses are not living. Viruses are DNA, but they can't reproduce without infecting another cell. So once this virus gets into the cell of the plant, then it can start reproducing and infect other cells in the plant. And that goes for viruses that infect us too. There's no cure for viruses. So if the best thing is trying to prevent them if at all possible. And if you have a virus infected plant, get rid of it, even if it's the only one you've got. The top picture there is apple mosaic virus, so you can see the modeling of the leaves there. And the middle one is a cucumber plant, and it has distorted the leaves to the point where you can't even recognize that as a cucumber plant. The bottom one is a zucchini mosaic virus, and you can see what it does to the leaves, but look what it does to the fruit. It's all mottled and gnarled. So if your zucchini looks like that, you're going to recognize there's a problem. Get rid of the plant. Viral diseases, these leaf spots can appear anywhere on the leaf, but often follow the veins. So we had the fungus that was everywhere. We had the bacteria that was mostly between the veins, and now we've got viruses that are following along the veins. These appear dry with crisp, bright margins, and I don't have a very good picture to show that there. A tobacco mosaic virus. Mosaic viruses affect a variety of plant families: beans, celery, cucurbits, lettuce, peppers, tomatoes, and potatoes. On the cucumber mosaic there, you can see how discolored the leaves are, and I don't know if you can see it, but the peppers are really misshapen too. They have real pointy little ends that curl and dry. The yellow mosaic virus, you have stunted plants, shoot dieback. If you look where the beans are there, there's no leaves around them. So either the leaves are deformed or there just aren't any. And also the pods, the bean pods are misshapen and mottled with other colors. The pea streak, I don't know if you could see the purple streaks on the stems there, but there are tiny little purple streaks. There are purple streaks on the leaves, and look at how distorted that pod is. Totally misshapen, and they can even be appear to be brownish colored. So we can't cure viral diseases, but we can try to control them. Control the weeds, because they can be hosts. Control the insects, because they can carry the virus. Remove and destroy the diseased plants. And here's one you do have some control over. Select resistant varieties. Now, the problem is, we promote raising heirloom seeds, saving seeds from your own, but not if they're diseased. Also, a lot of heirlooms are not resistant to viruses. And so hybrid plants have been bred for certain diseases. If you have heirlooms, you've got a whole row of tomatoes, and they're all infected. They look terrible. And there's this one healthy one in the middle. Guess what? It's naturally resistant. So that one you could save seeds from. And that's the way that you breed up a variety that is disease resistant. It's probably how the seed companies breed up resistant plants too. They find the ones that are resistant to a certain disease, cross it with a variety that's got characteristics that they like, and now you've got a real high quality tomato with disease resistance. Keep tools clean and disinfected. We've talked about many of those before. Use your packages and seed catalogs. If you don't order from seed catalogs, you can still order the catalog from the company. And they've got lots of great information in here. So I put little tabs in here because some of these, it will tell you what they're resistant to in the description of the vegetable itself. Down here on the bottom, it's got a table that tells you, it's kind of like that one up there. It gives you the codes. So when you look at a package of seeds, it'll have a bunch of letters on there, like T, V, F, or whatever. And if you don't know what those are, well, there's a table in here that tells you what those are. I'll start this one in the back. Also, if you go to the websites of these seed companies, you can get, this is from Johnny Seeds, and I printed it off. It is 4 pages of diseases with their codes. And those are the same for every seed company, those codes are, what they use to describe a certain disease. So this one's from Territorial, not nearly as, it's 1 page, but this one's 4 pages. Okay, on one of the garden hours, they were talking about day neutral strawberries, so that kind of intrigued me. So I went to my, let's see, this is Young Seeds. And yes, I found day neutral strawberries in here. But I also found that strawberries have resistance to diseases. And they have letters as well. So red steel, verticillium wilt, leaf diseases, powdery mildew, botrytis. So if you have problems with strawberries, well, let's see if you can find a disease-resistant variety. So for general disease prevention, it's all kind of the same. Rotate your crops, Use clean seed. Don't save it from diseased plants. Clean your shoes and garden tools. Wash your hands and gloves. Mulch. You can use straw, grass, plastic, fabric. That keeps those pathogens from splashing up onto your plants. Create grassy walkways that you can mow. Then you won't have these areas with weeds, and they'll be close to the ground. Use trellises to keep your plant leaves off the ground and disinfect them at the end of the season so that if they've got a virus or whatever on the wire, it's not going to carry through to your plants next year. You can do that by spraying them down with Lysol, by using hot soapy water and then rinsing them. And then you can leave them out in the hot sun in the fall for several days to get your trellises all disinfected. Remove and destroy your infected plants and use only fully composted compost. So all of those will help you with all of these diseases. So, where to go for help? Make sure that your soil has good fertility because that creates healthy plants. And South Dakota does not have a soil testing lab, but here's where you go at SDSU and they will give you information as to where you can send your soil for testing. And they'll also tell you how to collect the sample and how to mail it in, and there probably is a charge for that. There are soil testing labs at universities in states around us. The garden hotline is through SDSU Extension. I think there's 4 or 5 sites around the state of South Dakota. Our closest is Sioux Falls, and they will answer your questions and try to help you determine what's going on. You have to provide pictures, and they want clear pictures so they can really see what the problem is. They want one close-up and one that's the whole plant. And if they don't know, if the people who are operating the garden line don't know the answer to your question, they will pass that on to the next one on the list there, which is the SDSU Diagnostic Clinic. And that clinic, that laboratory is located on the campus at SDSU. And you can go there and take your sample there if you want to drive to Brookings. But you can also send pictures. And if they want a sample, if you want to send a sample, there will be a charge for that. But go to that site and make sure you know how to send that sample. And send it at the beginning of the week. Because if you send it on Friday, it's going to get there on Saturday. There might not be anybody in the lab. It's going to sit there Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Who knows when they get the mail? Who knows how many samples they've got? So they might not get it till Tuesday, and by that time, it's just, they can't identify anything anymore. So if you're going to send a sample, do it early in the week, Monday or Tuesday. A good online tool is the University of Minnesota Plant Diseases Diagnostic Tool. You go to that website and they'll say, you know, what's your plant? So I've got a problem with my tomato. You click on tomato and then it'll come up and give you choices to describe the appearance and everything of that tomato. And as you go through it, by the time you get to the bottom, there might be an answer for you. But it's a great tool to use. So if you want to take a picture of that slide, go ahead, then you'll have the addresses. I'll give you a minute here. Okay. Some other resources, and there are many more than this, but this is an amazing book. It is called Identifying Diseases of Vegetables. It comes from Penn State. You can order it directly from them. This cost me $12 plus $12 to ship it. But it is all pictures. So, and it's sorted, this is just vegetables, but it's sorted by like, here's onions. And so there's all these pictures of onions, and if you find a picture that looks like your problem, then you can read about it and see if that makes sense. So for anybody who is an enthusiastic vegetable gardener, I recommend this resource. Under the e-resources, that first one is that diagnostic tool again from Minnesota. The plant disease resistant codes, you can find those in any seed company's website. And then there are a lot of YouTube videos out there. If you're going to watch a YouTube video, I would recommend that you get one sort of from around our area, because one from Arizona, California might not be the same as what we're dealing with here. And also check to see that it either comes from Extension or from a university, because everything that they publish is scientifically tested. So you know that it's not just some old wives' tale about what might work. Any questions for either of us? Okay. Feel free to come up here and look at that book.
Yeah.
Oh, the grapes in the leaf, what happened to them? Not that I really need them, but.
Thank you. Yeah, I do.
And